Good morning and welcome to Pixel Chatter number 9. Hopefully everything is working well. Every time I start this up, I seem to have a few technical issues that I have to solve with this live streaming stuff. But here we are today. I think I'm pretty much there, which is good. All right, let's get stuck straight into the show. Got an exciting show today. Let me go to my dashboard here and just make sure everything's working well. Yeah, got an exciting show today because I've got a big announcement that I wanted to make and let everybody know about. G'day, Brian. How are you? Really excited about doing that. I don't know, I had a bit of a technical issue getting things started today with this live stream, and unfortunately that sometimes just happens. Let's have a look and make sure everything's working. You can obviously hear me okay, which is good. Yeah. G'day, big guys. Got another one of your images today. I'm going to be critiquing. Doing a bit of a theme today. We're going to be doing a bit of a night photography theme, which should be pretty cool. I've got a few images of night photography that I'm going to be doing, and I should have brushed my hair this morning, shouldn't I? Not that you guys care. That's why I normally wear my hat in my videos. When you see me with my Spitfire hat, it's because I'm hiding my hair. Besides the fact the sun's going to come up and going to be very bright, but usually my hair's like this in the morning. It's quite thick, and it gets quite out of shape until I put something in it, which I haven't done today. But anyway, that's pretty vain of me, isn't it? All right, let's get stuck into today's show. Good to see you all here. G'day, Doug. G'day, Tim. Florida. Good evening from Florida. Awesome. Some exciting stuff coming up today. Before I do get stuck into that, I want to remind you, if you haven't already, I know I say this every episode, but I know we've got new people here, so welcome if you're new to the Pixel Chatter show. If you're a first timer, g'day. This show is a sort of, it's just an unscripted chit-chat about things photography. I critique a few images. We have a bit of fun. It's not for everybody, the longer format show, but somebody always turns up, as you can see. And if you're a long-time follower, then welcome back. Good to have you here. You'll know these two links already. But you can connect with me on Facebook or Instagram. Both of those channels I'm pretty active on. I'm doing my best to also post on Twitter as often as possible, because I know people use different platforms, but it gets hard when you start trying to spread yourself across. It'd be nice if you could put the same amount of content on each of the platforms, because then you could use one of those software programs that allows you to post on several at once and not worry about your text being cut off. But I know that if I use like a Hootsuite or one of those programs that post on all the social media for me, I quite often write a fair bit of a paragraph about how I took the shot or what I was doing at the time, and it doesn't work. So I'm doing my best to get on those others, but these are the two main that you'll definitely find me on. You can even message me through Facebook. I'm pretty actively respondent on, which is cool. The other thing that you can do if you're not already, and make sure I go to the right button. There we go. If you haven't already, head across to my website, which is on3legs.com. You can use the word or the number. And I have an ebook over there called the 10 Tips to Better Photos. And download yourself the ebook. That's the start. Some great tips in there of how to make sure your photos are better. And it is an opt-in, so you do need to put your name and your email address in. I've got thousands of people on my email list. But you don't have to stick around on my email list if it's not for you. I actually send out a newsletter each week called Weekly Focus. And in that, I remind you of the latest vlog, typically a tip of some sort, and any other news. It's a pretty quick read, and it hits your inbox every week. So if you want to keep on that list, then you can. If not, once you've got the free ebook, just unsubscribe. I'm okay with that. I understand everyone's ebook is getting, not ebook, everybody's inbox is getting ridiculously overloaded. I look at mine, I get it down to 0, and then 2 hours later there's 20 unread emails in there, but that's all right. On that note, you can fill up my inbox if you like with more images to be critiqued on Pixel Chatter. And you can do that. The instructions are down below. But you can basically just send an email to ben@on3legs.com. Try and send 3 images. That gives me 3 to choose from. Try and keep the EXIF information in the image if you can. And put a description of how you got the shots in the email so I know what's going on. All right, let's check the chat and see who we've got hanging around. G'day, Anthony. Good to see you here. Who have we got on board this morning? Good to see everybody tuning in. But I've got a really big announcement, actually. I might just go straight into that. Actually, before I do, I just wanted to let you know whose images I'm critiquing today. I've got Derek Windsor, Chris, or Big Oz as we know him, Big Oz 1977, who you'll find in the chat box. We've done one of Big Oz's before, but we're going to do another one because I'm doing a bit of a night photography theme today. And Steve Millwood, hopefully I've said that's right, Steve, who's over in the UK. So I've got 3 images that I'm going to critique today. Thanks, guys. Don't get many sent in by the girls. And it's funny, when you look at the stats, even of the YouTube give you these stats of, your followers. And it's interesting to see that like 90% of my followers are guys. Maybe I was never good at attracting the ladies, unfortunately. In other words, I've never been the good-looking guy with the big abs. I've got one big ab, so there you go. Howdy from Texas. G'day, John. How are you? Alrighty, and Big Oz says, I meant to say, I think I know why the pics I sent you aren't very good quality. When exporting for Lightroom, the quality wasn't set to highest quality available. That's okay, mate. That's all right. We'll make do. All right, let's get stuck straight into this exciting announcement. I want to tell you about something. And I actually went through a fair bit of thinking before I decided to do this. About, 4 or 5 years ago, things on my channel started to really pace up. My followers sort of started to really grow on Facebook. I didn't have much of a YouTube going then. I had a little bit going on, but I had the odd thing I was sticking up. I wasn't going crazy sticking out weekly content. And a keg is always better than a 6-pack. I'm not going to argue with that. So things were going well, and so I started building a community on my On 3 Legs. And if you'd ever been to On 3 Legs prior to it being removed, there was a little login button on the top right-hand corner. The back-end community never got finished. It was pretty complex to build. And of course, it costs money, right? Even just having that website. I built most of that website. I did spend a bit of money on a freelancer, but I built most of it. And it might help if I give you a bit of an insight into how the story started. A long time ago, I was following another photographer called Trey Ratcliffe. Now, Trey Ratcliffe's got this amazing website, which I'll bring up actually on the screen, because he's a great photographer. And if you don't follow him, then you may want to. Now, he's skewed a little bit for me in the last few years in the way that he interacts with his followers, and I think it's because he got a lot of followers and probably got annoyed, but an amazing photographer. So I'm just going to bring that up for you. So Stuck in Custom. So what I was doing was I was following this guy's work, and every day he would post a photo, and I thought, what a great idea. Now he's big into his HDR, and he's an amazing photographer. Loves his landscape photography, as you can see, and does a few other things now where he's doing things like people and stuff that that he's sort of skewed into, but always a great photographer. So I was following him for a long time, and then I thought to myself, well, how many photos have I got sitting on a hard drive that I haven't shared? So that's what I decided to do, and that's how On 3 Legs started. So my website, On 3 Leg, I was posting a picture every day, and it got some, started to get some traction, started to get a few thousand people visiting it on a regular basis, and that's sort of how that started to happen. So there's my website there if you haven't seen it. I'm not posting on there every day anymore, but you'll see I post pictures, I post the vlogs on there. But if I went back to page 64, you'll see that I was putting a photo up there every day, and you're not gonna see them because we changed the theme of the website at some stage, which meant that these photos don't show up unless you click in there. But every day I was posting a photo and writing a bit about it. And I was doing this simply just to share my photography because, and keep it documented. But what happened was that what I didn't expect was to get a stack of followers. And so that's what happened. And so as a result of that, I then started to be asked to do other things like, let me just get rid of this screen so you're not watching me get rid of all of those. I think I started to do things like teach people how to do photography, which is cool. I love teaching, right? If anyone knows my business background, I have a company that is probably Australia's most comprehensive business training company. What we do is we teach business owners how to build a better business so they can enjoy their life more, and so we do a lot of training, a lot of coaching, and so it's in my DNA. So when people started asking me to teach them about photography, I thought, you know what, I would like to do that, and so that's when I started to build courses, etc. And you know, I found that I'd go out and do some training as well. So I'd go and run photo walks. I started a group called the Photo Walk Guys with a mate of mine, and we used to get photo walks where we'd have over 100 people turn up in Sydney, and lots of cool stuff that we did. And I thought, you know what, I'll build a community online, because there were so many people that were all over the world that couldn't come to the things that we were running locally. So I decided to start working on a project where I would build a community that included the option to have training, etc. And it just went by the wayside. And I can see John said he tried to post 3 days a week on Instagram, but it became taxing on my daily life. Yeah, well, I post a picture every day on Instagram. Typically, I didn't this morning, but typically when I sit down with my morning coffee, because I love to have my morning cuppa, I will post a picture, I'll write up a little bit about it, I'll share it on Facebook automatically through the Instagram app, and then I'll go to Twitter and I'll do something there as well. But yeah, it does take 10, 15, 20 minutes to do that. But it's my love of photography. I love sharing my photography, and I love the fact that, especially with this YouTube channel, I get to help so many other people. I think it's pretty cool. So where's all this going? Well, I started to look into the options of restarting my community, and it was going to be quite expensive to get the website to where it needed to be. And then I started talking to somebody else who was using Patreon as a avenue. Now, I don't know if you've heard of Patreon. I'm going to show you. But Patreon is where I've decided to go. And the good thing about this, and this, by the way, if you haven't heard of Patreon, Patreon is a platform that allows creators and those that follow creators to work together to build a consistent monthly revenue to be able to then improve on the products that we create, or the videos we create, and the outcome of what we do. And I understand, here's the thing I understand, it's not going to be for everybody. So I want to straight away start by saying you do not need to be a Patreon. I do not want you to pay anything if it's not something you want to be involved in. If you don't want to join the community, if you don't want any training, etc., then you don't have to. I'm still going to put out all the free stuff that I put out. What I want to do, though, is I want to be able to take my channel to the next level. I'd love a goal of being able to do what I do full time. Right now, I do it out of the sheer love of doing it, and I put a lot of hours into it. I'm sure anybody who's edited a video or done any of this knows that it can be a lot of work. So what I decided to do was I thought, you know what, I'm going to relaunch my community. I'm going to use somebody else's platform, so I don't have to worry about the technology and making sure everything works. And it's going to give you the opportunity to become part of a community if you want to be. And so I've called it the On Three Legs VIP community. It's a very important photographer. And you can join from as little as a couple of bucks a month. And what that does is it starts to fund the channel. And as a VIP, you actually get some creative control. Depending on the level you come in, you can come in at a higher level. And you can have a read of this later if you want. But I've set, like even at $15 a month to get into a monthly webinar on hanging out and doing some photography stuff. So, I'll buy some webinar software and we'll be able to do webinars. If you want training, I've actually just hired a videographer to do a full training on using your camera properly. So, if you go up to the next level at $25 a month, you'll actually get access to all the trainings that I develop. And I've got 17 different courses mapped out. I'm going to start with one that's sort of going to suit everybody. And then we're going to do courses like night photography, landscape photography, macro photography, wide angle lenses or lens choice, buying lenses, all sorts of different courses we've got mapped out. And you'll get to help choose on what we do next, what products we get reviewed, etc., etc. And the funding that the funding that comes through this, I'm going to use then to fund things like building the training. I'm going to fund things like buying product or renting product to review if people want me to review something. And it's really, it's pretty exciting. So that's why I'm going down this path. And so I wanted to just let you know about it. You'll see it over the next few days, but there's absolutely no obligation for you to become a part of it. The other thing that every single VIP gets is access to a private Facebook group that I'm going to start, where you'll be able to chat with me one-on-one, other followers one-on-one, so other VIPs. You'll be able to post images in there, get feedback. So it's going to be a community that then helps you get better at taking photos. And I've always had this passion of wanting to do it, but wondered how I was going to run it and fund it. And this is how I'm going to do it. So it's a community. It's your community. I'm not looking to, make a squillion bucks out of this. What I want to do is just support the ability to be able to make this something more than just a YouTube channel, which I think I can. and I think it'll be a lot of fun. One of the things that's happening a lot now, and you won't be surprised by this, but one of the things that's happening a lot now is that I'm getting a huge amount of requests from companies to access you, which sort of surprised me in some ways, because what happened was, it didn't surprise me entirely, but I get people sending me messages, and they're from companies. A lot of them have crappy products, and they want me to promote them to you. And I showed you one of those products last week. It was that Photo Lemur or whatever. They approached me. They gave me a free copy of their software and said, we'll give you free software if you can tell your followers about this and give us a review, etc. And I said no, and that's why I only had the demo version, which is fine anyway. But I'm not the sort of person that I don't want to be at the mercy of the big corporates or any company paying me a sponsorship deal. I've already seen on other photographers that I follow on YouTube, and you may have seen this too, I've seen photographers promoting website companies that they don't actually use, or product companies they don't actually use. So they're promoting products and services that they don't use themselves. I personally have a huge problem with that. Now I know why they're doing it, because their channel's big and they need to be able to fund it somehow, because at some point you've got to pay external people to help you with the editing, or to get the content out there. It takes a bit of work. So I understand why they're doing it, but I feel there's a lack of congruency or integrity in promoting something that I haven't even used myself, or wouldn't use myself, to my audience. I just wouldn't do that. And I think we have a responsibility as creators to be able to have integrity and congruency when we communicate something to you. And that's why I'm very clear. If I show you something that I don't use or I don't like, I tell you that. I've had companies that have said, we're going to give you this thing, and it might be a camera, or it could be something substantial. They're going to give me something valued hundreds of dollars or $1,000. We want you to review it, but our marketing team has to be able to edit your review before it goes live. And I go, no, not going to happen. But that's the sort of stuff that's going out there. So I just want you to know. So what I decided was, rather than be mercy to that, I'm going to start my Patreon page. So if you do want to become a Patreon, I'm just launching it today. No one's seen this yet. You can go to patreon.com, which I'll show you once again on the screen. So it's Patreon, which is patreon.com/on3legs with the number 3. And you'll come to this page. You can watch the video, have a look at the different rewards. At every level, you get something. Okay, so I don't just want to take your money and not give something back. This is about building a community where I help you. It's not about helping me. It's about helping us together build a community. And I thought to myself, rather than the sponsors being the customers, I want you guys to be the customers, in a sense. That way you have control over where we take this channel and what we do in the community, instead of some big corporate, because I don't want to be promoting a website company that I don't believe in, or a product that I don't believe in, just to be able to pay the costs. I think that's ridiculous. So hopefully you'll see why I'm doing it, and you'll get involved. I'd love to see you on there. If you've got any questions, shoot them across now. I'd love to hear from you and see what your thoughts are on that. Let me go back to this page so you're not looking at that. Chris, hi from freezing Adelaide. Is it cold down there, mate? We were supposed to have a really cold night last night. It didn't really eventuate, so yeah. Anyway, that's my super big announcement. The good news is anybody who joins will jump into a community together and hang out. As soon as you join, you get a link to that. There's only me and the boss in there at the moment, so when you join, you'll be one of the first to get chatting with me. But looking forward to having that community grow and prosper, and it's going to be exciting. Even the polar bears and penguins are cold. Great stuff. All right, so let's get stuck into other things. If you haven't got any questions on that, there's a bit of a delay on the question box, so I might just... You said even the polar bears are cold, and then you retracted your message, Chris. That's interesting. Didn't want to offend the polar bears. I understand. All right, so let's get Lightroom up and running, and I'll show you the 3 images we're going to look at today, because we've got some exciting stuff. So, as I said at the beginning, it's a bit of a nighttime theme. I didn't do any questions today because I thought I'd tell you about the community that I'm launching, the VIP, the Very Important Photography Community, which I've done. And so we're going to get straight into the critiques now. If you do have a question you want to ask, just stick it into the box, into the chat box, and I'll answer it anyway. Why not? We'll just do it on the fly. Let me show you these photos. Okay, let's go across to the... Why isn't this cooperating? I retracted due to spelling mistakes. I understand. Alright, so that's weird. I've got something weird going on again. So I'm going to just minimize that out of the way. Where's my... Ah, it's gone over there. Weird stuff happens sometimes. I don't know why. I don't want that there. Oh, no. How do I move it back over? You won't believe what's happened. Okay, that's interesting. Why is that? I want to minimize it and bring it back over. Technical issues again. Maybe I don't want to minimize. I want to... I just want to get it on the other screen. Okay, I'm going to have to close it and reopen it. Oh, the joys of technology, eh? When you're live. Always happens when you're live. No, it's opened up on the wrong screen. Oh, no, it's coming on the right screen now. All right. Oh, boy. Now I can show you my screen. Because it's hard to explain, but I have... Let me explain this to you. I have... someone at the front beeping their horn. I have a iPad set up as my second screen. And if you have a Mac, this is something a lot of people don't know you can do. You can download an app called Duet. You can plug it into your Mac or your iPhone or whatever you like. Not your iPhone, no, sorry. Mac or MacBooks. So it's got to be one of them PCs or Macs. And it operates as a second screen, which is awesome. So I use it in business. If I'm sitting there with my little MacBook, I can use it as a presentation screen. Just hook it up via USB and displays my PowerPoint. The other thing I use it for is here. I use it as a second screen to monitor the all the software that runs the live broadcast. Because if it's on this main screen, you'll see it. You don't want to see that. Along with the chat boxes sitting on the other side as well. So that's what's going on. If you're wondering, I'll just bring this other one back up now. Hopefully that should work as well. I should be able to go between the two. There it is. Yeah. Okay. Everything seems to be working now, which is good. Alright. So we're going to pop into Lightroom. I've got to remember that, when you use this one of the commands on Mac to switch between screens or programs, it flicks Lightroom across to my little screen, which means you can't see it. So here we go. So here are the three images that we've got today. We have got, let's have a look. The first one here is from Derek Windsor in Hong Kong. Next one here is from Big Oz, who's Chris, who's in the chat box, which is a night shot we're going to have a chat about. And then the next one is from Steve Millwood, which is from Derby in England. This is the Clock Warehouse. So let's jump straight into these so we can have a bit of a look and see what we could have done better. So straight away looking at this image. Now this one here is... As you can see, Derek has put the information here, but we actually have got the EXIF information. Shot at ISO 100. Number, that's a great thing to do when you're shooting at night. You want your ISO as low as you can go. So that's really important. Otherwise, you're going to find you're going to get some noise in your image. So good thing he's done that. 50mm. Now I don't know what lens he was using. Oh, the 17 to 50mm lens. So he zoomed right in, and he's at he's at f9. ISO 100, 50mm, f9. Exposure set to 6 seconds in manual. Okay, so it gives you an idea of how it was done, how it was shot. Now, there's a couple of things for me going on here that straight away I would like to fix, and I'll tell you what they are. So let's get into the develop module. Now, straight away you can see if I put this grid, let me just put it on the bottom so you can really see what's going on. I'm just going to crop it for a second, but this is just to demonstrate to you what's going on down the bottom. You see I've started at the horizon there, or at the edge of the thing. You can see that I think things aren't straight. If I just undo that and I put this back over the top, and we move this into one of these buildings, you'll see that she's a bit crooked. Yeah, she's slightly off. All right. So I would straighten it. Now, if you have a look in Lightroom, you have this amazing ability to use things like the Auto Pro. So over here on the right, I don't know if you can see this, but you can actually hit Auto and see if it works out for you. And in this case, it has. So you can see the slight straightening it's done. And that's how easy it is to straighten things. And that was the first thing I noticed. And it's actually quite irritating. And, you know, quite often we don't get our shots straight when we take them for whatever reason. We're in a rush. We've got the camera sitting on a top of a, I don't know, like a brick column or something, or who knows. But quite often we don't get them straight. So it's important to make sure that if you're going to take a landscape shot, that you get the horizon straight. Unless you're going to have it way off and it's creative, it's one of those little things that need to do straight away. Now, if I take a look now at the, let's have a look at the highlights. Nothing pumping out, so we haven't lost any detail, which is good. Yeah, good. It's quite a way before those blow right out. Now, with night photography, especially with buildings, it's really important that you take note of things that are, you're going to get things at a lot of different levels of light. That's just the reality of night. And so 6 seconds, I think, was probably a fine choice. It's okay, nothing wrong with that. And it's what you needed to capture all the light. You probably could have gone a little bit shorter in time or a little bit longer. Wouldn't have mattered because so it's a decent exposure, fairly well exposed. I like at night when you've got all this colour. One of the things you can do if you have it is use a filter, and you're going to get, your reflections are going to be more amazing off the water than what this is. And that's just what happens when you use a longer exposure. And you've got the blue and the sort of the reddy orange colour here, but you would have picked up a lot more if you used a longer exposure. But that's just me being, you know, a little bit picky about how I would have done it, and maybe you didn't have the ability to do that because you've shot this at f9. You would have needed a filter of some sort. If you'd stuck a CPL filter on, it would have given you a little bit longer exposure, and of course then you can go to something like a you know, a big stopper, or the new one they've got, which is like a 6 stops of light. It's not called the big stopper, it's called the something else. The not quite so big stopper, I don't know what they call it. There's something else they've got. So I would have done that. Now, to fix this image, there's a couple of things that I feel are wrong with it. Number one, it's missing contrast straight away. So, you know, as soon as you bring contrast into a night image, you're going to get rid of that haziness. See that haziness when I drop the contrast? So you've got to decide how you're going to do that. Now, you can do the blacks and the whites. Let's just do that. And I would do my best to try and get rid of as much of the haziness as I can by bringing that contrast up, something like that. And then I would also then look at how can I reduce the exposure of these really bright areas. So I'd grab a brush, make sure everything's set to 0 except for exposure, wind it down to -4, which is extreme, but it's what we need for now. Zoom in on your image, so you've got a good, you know, really good average, a good close look at things, and then you want to go in and you want to colour these in. Now let me just undo that for a second. I'll just turn that brush off for a second, and then we're going to just move things around so I can show you. Have we got one that's actually got a sign that says something? I'm going to try and bring something back to life so you can see the detail. Because what happens is, at night, it's easy. Oh, the little stopper. Thank you, Viking. What happens is, at night, let's go back into the brush. At night, you tend to lose the detail in things. Because these things start to overexpose heaps. Now, if I just brush in this, I'm doing this at -4, which is overdoing it, right? But then you can bring the exposure back up until you sort of get a bit of the detail back. And what happens is, if we just zoom out, I don't know how well that's going to work for your screen, turn that brush off, it just brings the detail back in these signs. So let's go up to this one up here. See how overblown it is? Let's grab a brush. And I tend to do them all separately because they need different exposure values to get them to be right. And I'm doing this really roughly, but I'm just dropping the exposure. The other thing you can do when you're in here is grab the highlights and bring that to the left as well. But really what we want to do is we want to really work on just bringing the exposure down on each of the lights. And it takes a little bit of time. I'll just bring the exposure back up now so it's not so obvious. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just get some of the detail back and stop it looking so blown out. And, you know, it just depends on where you want to put it. If I go back to there, you know, I've done it. It doesn't look good. You really need to spend a bit of time. But you can sort of get the picture. See how this one now is starting to look a bit more like it should. And I'll grab a second brush now, because the next thing I need to do is I want to get rid of all the real shiny stuff around it. So the way you do that is the same thing, but you just go around the outside like this. So it's not as crazy. Because what happens is when you're taking this exposure, depending at your aperture, with f9 it's not too bad. The higher the number, the more of this sort of stuff is going to happen. It's going to come off around your image. So you can see the haloing. I'm being really rough. I wouldn't be this rough. But you can see that I'm starting to bring it back. Let me go and bring the exposure back up a little bit now so it's not too crazy. It's got to blend in. So maybe it's got to blend in, otherwise it's going to look funny. So you've got to spend a bit of time getting it right. But you can see, here we go. That'll do for the demonstration. Let's go back to fit. And you'll see how you can start making them look a bit more like they're meant to be there. I'm going to go back into that one, and I'm just going to bring that exposure back up a little bit. Turn that off a second. Especially works well if you've got words. Like see here, this CTI. You can see it's really blown out. So if you do it on things like that, it works really well. And you can spend, you can spend forever doing it. Now that we're in where the buildings are, so I'll bring it down just to 2. Bring the highlights right down. Even if you just bring the highlights down, watch this. If I just do this, bring the highlights down. And let's just brush over it and bring the highlights down. And you'll see that alone. And I typically do the highlights and the exposure separately. I do around it separately. You can see there's a lot of haze in there from that. So on a night photo, don't be afraid. You can see straight away how different it looks just there where that Citibank sign is now. And that's just because I'm now bringing down the highlights of that area. So, you know, there's a lot of tricks you can do to try and make it look a bit more, you know, a bit more like your eye would see it. Yeah, that's coming up together nicely. To do that, do a separate one for exposure. I'll be here all day if I do them all separately. But it gives you an idea, right? So if we just, let me bring the before and after up so you can start to see what's happening. Okay, so you can see on the after, we're starting to get a lot less of the blurriness or glariness happening. And if you look at the Shangri-La sign, you know, for some reason, it's actually quite good. Okay, and that's what I'm trying to do with these other ones. I try and work until I get those looking a lot more, you know, less blown out. Because that's, to me, that detracts from an image, and it's quite hard to do. Quite often what I do is I'll take multiple exposures and blend them together. So instead of I'm going to go through that process, I'm just blending photos together. But it sort of gives you an idea. All right, let's go back to the full screen. All right, so that gives you an idea of what I would do with that one. From a composition point of view, it's a cityscape, so it's okay. I still would want to bring in some more contrast. So the clarity slider is a great one for that. But it's going to change your exposure value slightly. So you've got to be careful about how much you put in there. Let's put a bit of vibrance. Ooh, don't like the vibrance. The vibrance takes the golds of all the lights up a bit too much. So I might just add a little bit. Definitely needs a bit more contrast, so it looks like it's nighttime. Yeah, that's looking good. From a technical aspect, that's probably what I would do. Just have a look at the before and after now. You can see the difference just by getting rid of that haze. And it's a big problem at night. And, you know, depending on your lens, I mean, that's not a bad lens, the one he's used, so it's a good lens. You know, if you use it like a f5.6 or something that's a poorer quality glass, you're going to find that the problem gets worse. So I think at night photography, one of the keys is getting that contrast so it looks nice. And if you can just look at the difference between the left and the right, and I'm working with a JPEG here, so you're going to get a much better result when you work with your RAW files. The other thing I would probably do is I would probably get rid of some of the distracting things up here. So you can see, if I just go back to the single shot again, let me zoom in on this one here. Don't do that. Give me that. Get rid of that. All right. If I let's zoom in on this here. See these few dots are just. We know it's a tower, but they're just a few distracting spots in the middle of the sky. So get rid of them. You know, we don't need them. So that's what I do. Anything that doesn't work in the image, just get rid of. And you've heard me say time and time again, there's nothing wrong with it. People will shun you. See, there's one there. Same thing, I would do the same thing. It looks distracting, so just get rid of it. Anything that looks distracting, just get rid of. I would be tempted, and it would take a lot longer than what we have here, to remove a lot of this in the background. That is just things up on the hill, because I think the cityscape, the line of buildings is beautiful. Needs a bit of cooling down as well. I think it's just got a bit gold, so let's just cool it down, get the white balance right. Just bring that back up a little bit. There we go. Now let's have a look at the before and after again. So there you go. So you can start to see, just with a little bit of effort, how different your image can look. And this is, like, a lot of photographers won't tell you this. This is the trick. It's not just out there when you're shooting. What happens when you start to really learn how to process your image? Good shot, by the way. So well done to who was this one? This one was Derek. Good shot, Derek. Really like it. I like the cityscape. The composition's good. You know, Hong Kong's a hustle bustle city, and I think you've brought the hustle and bustle to the image in the way that you've done it, and you've captured a lot of the city lights and the colours. So well done there. But as you can see, all the image data is in your image. So, you know, just go back and do a bit of reprocessing, and I think you'll be happier with your outcome. Just get that little bit of, you know, a better looking image just in that final pictures. All right, just going to have a drink out of my biker's biggest morning teacup. Have I got any other bikers here? Who did I see the other day that had a bike? I saw it on, was it you, Chris? I think it was you, Chris, had one on Instagram, picture of a bike. Love riding my bike. This is going cold, so I'm just going to finish it up. All right, on that note, Chris, we're going to do yours next. Yeah, it was you. Was you, Brian, was it, that had the bike? I can't remember who it was. All right, let's get stuck into it. So here we have an image of, looks like a shopping centre car park. And I'm guessing, because we've got Big Oss here in the chat and we can ask him some questions, I'm guessing you did this to practice shooting at night, maybe. A few things going on here that we need to chat about. Oh, Brian broke his back on a bike. That's no good, mate. And Big Oz, that's right, you totaled yours in a crash last week. Stop crashing, guys. It's no good for your health. All right, so if we have a look at this, there's a few things going on that I wanted to run through. First of all, you'll see all the diffraction going on of the stars. See how the lights look like stars? And let's just go into the library section for a second because I've got my notes in there. Composition can be better, but I'll only be using a DSLR for 2 weeks at this point. Yeah, that's cool. Great. That's what this is all about. Remember, there's no judgment here. This is just about helping you get better at taking photos. So ISO 100, 18mm, f22, 20 seconds. It was your first attempt at light trials. Well, good. A good for you to get, and this is good. Go out and practice. But I want to tell you about a few things that are going on here so you know why it's happening. These stars can be quite a good effect if you want them. In this image, it doesn't work because there's so many lights that there's just stars everywhere that I actually didn't see the light trails straight away. It's not the first thing you see. The first thing you see is these great big bright stars everywhere. Now, the reason that's happened is because what happens is when you... I'll just make it a bit bigger, see if you can see it better. That's better. When you take a shot at a high aperture, so f22, for example, which would have been the minimum aperture, which I know is weird because that's how photography works. It's the biggest number, f22, for that lens, but it's the minimum aperture or the smallest possible hole you could have to, and you've done that so you can extend your shutter speed time, right? So by doing that, what happens is you end up with this side effect, which is these stars. So if you're wondering why you get these stars or how you get these stars, if you want to do it on purpose, you shoot a shot at f22 or f32, or as you know, whatever the higher you go on your lens, whatever it'll go to, the more those stars will be prominent. So that's why they're there. So it's important that you know what creates some of these things, because then you can start to have some creativeness over your image. And this is why you don't want to be shooting at f22 at night unless you want these stars. Now, it would look good. Let's say there was very few lights. Let's say it was a bridge, and that bridge had a light on top, one light, and it was not a big dominant part of the image. You could do it and it would probably work well, because then you've just got one star instead of having this, because this is really overrun by those stars. So that's the first thing I would suggest, is make sure that you understand what creates these artifacts or side effects in your shots, and that way you can control them. Now, the next thing that's happening is you'll have a look. If you have a look at the histogram, it's not easy to see on your screen, I'm sure, but there are some pixels that are bunched up right against the right-hand side of the histogram. So what that means is that some of this photo is overexposed, and you've got pixels that you will never be able to recover, because the detail gets lost when that happens. So I suggest that when you take a shot, look at your histogram on the back of your camera. Do not trust your camera's LCD screen. All you're going to see in the LCD screen is what does the picture look like, and your LCD screen is then usually calibrated and maximized for your viewing enjoyment of a preview, not the final image. And the problem is, if you're using your LCD screen to rely on your final image, you're going to run into trouble, because it's going to lie to you. It's going to tell you it looks better than it actually does. I see Chris. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. It's Chris Landman going. I can't stress enough, and the amount of people that I've trained with photography one-on-one that rely on looking at their screen and go, that's a good shot, but they're not looking at their histogram, or the other alternative is to turn on your flashing highlights. Now, every camera is different as to how you do that, but I suggest that's how I do it. Just turn on your RGB flashing highlights, and what will happen is your back screen will flash in the areas that are blown out, and that way you can adjust your exposure. In this image here, you could have dropped the exposure in this by a couple of, probably at least a stop. So let me just go one stop. So there's one stop. Let me go 2 stops. Or sorry, not stops. This is full exposure. So that's 6 stops. There's 3 stops in an exposure value. So you can see that I've dropped this down by 2 exposure values. And I'd still be able to bring out the details if I had the raw file, by pumping up the shadows. Or the other thing I can do is in post, then I can actually slowly then bring the exposure up until I get what I want. So if I then go, yep, I bring it in, I go, yeah, I like the look of that. So you can see that's one full exposure less, and that looks more natural straight away. You can then do things like grab the highlights, bring the highlights down, bring the shadows up, start to bring a bit of contrast into the image. Let's get that temperature so it's right, because the white balance is screwed up a little bit, which it does at night. Let's just get those blacks really pumping. Let's do a quick crop, because I don't like this fence in the front at all. Let's get rid of that. Let's bring the top in a bit, and let's make it a night pano. I'm going to have some of that fence, aren't I? Because you need some of these light trails. I would have that light trail coming from the corner. That's better. Yeah, that's looking better. And straight away, you're getting a better looking image. So, when you're out there with the camera, a lot of things you can't fix in post-production. So you've got to really think about it when you're out there on the field. Think about, okay, well, what am I trying to achieve? Now, I know Chris was just trying to learn a bit about light trails, which he's definitely, he's mastered here. Got some light trails going on. If you don't know how to get light trails, the idea is that you do a long exposure. So if we look at the EXIF information, this has been a 20-second exposure. And the way that you get the 20-second exposure is by making sure your aperture is up on the highest number possible, but then you're going to get all these... You're waiting for me to mention the fancy. I don't like it at all. But that's okay, because you were practicing something. You're out there practicing, which I'm a big fan of. So if it wasn't a photo that you were going out there to get a cracking shot for your wall, and let's face it, it's not a very exciting subject. You've picked an intersection with a fence, with a car park, with some street lamps, with some light traffic lights. It's probably not the spot you'd go to go and take the most idyllic image. So I get that. What I wanted to do is use this one as a example of how to get more technically correct images, because night photography is tough. So as you see, today's theme is night photography, and the whole idea is to help you understand that at night you do need to change the way that you think, because things change, and you're going to find it more difficult to get the image that you want. Now it looks like at some point too, I can see someone here might have been on a push bike, and they've crossed the road. See that? There's a light going across there, and then they've turned left there and up there on the path. So they must have been on a push bike with a flashing red light, maybe. Not entirely sure. Yeah. But otherwise, all in all, you sort of get the feel for it. I get a feeling, Brian, that you weren't taking this for a cracking shot to stick on your wall, but you were taking it just to practice. So, I think I can forgive you for having the fence in there at this stage, being only having your thing for a couple of weeks. But definitely there's a few tips for you to make it a better shot. But if you're wondering why some of these side effects happen, at least then you know. The best thing to do is to, the other thing with things like light trails is the temptation is to try and go for ever. But what I know, as a lot of photographers do, is they'll do a 5-second exposure or something like that, a bit shorter, where you get less of these artifacts happening as well. Because the longer you have your shutter open, the more you're going to get, noise happening, etc. And then they'll blend them together. They'll do stacking inside of Lightroom or Photoshop, where they bring them all together, and they'll take many, many shots and they'll stack them all together. Because if it's on a tripod and it doesn't move, you can start to bring in an amazing amount of trails, and that's how a lot of star trails are done. They're just sometimes people will put hundreds of 30 seconds exposures into one image. So never feel. Never worry if you don't get the shot that you thought you were going to get when you get out there. You see other photographers' photos and you go, I'm going to go out and try and replicate that. Quite often, it's quite technical the way they've done it. But anyway, good try, Chris. Hopefully that's helped you with how to take a better shot at night. I'd encourage you to go out and take another one at night and send me another one, and we'll take a look at the differences of since then to now. Unless you own that car park, I don't know why you'd be taking photos of it. But anyway, maybe you like that car park, or maybe it's near home. I don't know. A good place to do light trails, if you've got it somewhere, is an overpass, and you can stand up on the bridge and take photos of the cars as they pass under. And if you've got tail lights on one side and headlights on the other, it can be quite a good effect, especially if a road winds off in the distance somewhere. And then you can just take a heap of shots and you can blend them all together. All right. So you're in Scotland in the winter. It was about 3 degrees. Well, no wonder there's, not too much going on. I don't know what time of night it was. It was probably 3 in the afternoon if it was in Scotland in the winter. Anyway, good stuff. Well done on getting that shot. Let's now go to the next one. And this one, here we go. Go jump quickly into the library. So this one's from Steve from Derby. Let me bring that one up on the screen. Let's check the chat box. What's going on before we jump into this image? About 4:30, yeah. No, it doesn't surprise me. Alrighty, how's everyone going? You going well? It's good to see everybody here. Alright, let's jump straight into this image. Can't see any new chatter in the chat box. I've sort of got better at monitoring that as I go now. One day I'll post a picture of my setup so you can see what I actually have to do to get everything going. But it's a bit of fun. Alrighty, so here's a night shot. This one is, I don't have any EXIF information, so I'm going to have to play a bit of a guessing game. But really like the shot. I like the, not quite a night shot, as you can see the colours in the sky to the back left corner of the image. You can see that it is either sunrise or sunset. Yeah, everyone is quiet, aren't they, in the chat box? You can see that this was sunrise or sunset because of the colour in the sky. And this is of the Clock Warehouse in Shardlow, Derby. And there's a few things going on here that I like, but a couple of things that I would have changed. Once again, and I don't think John's here today, Brian. No. I think once again, today, in this image, there's a big contrast between the dark and the lights, which is okay, but you've got to be careful. When things are artificially lit, like this building, you'll start to get real hot spots in your image. Also, if you have a look at the lights, I'll zoom in on them over to the right, this starts to give you a bit of an idea of what sort of an aperture this was shot at. So if you remember the rule I told you before, the higher the number, the more likely you're going to get this diffraction happening, where it creates these stars around lights. So I would say that he has shot this at a high aperture, probably the highest he could with his camera, to get a longer exposure. Now, the way the water is, the nice reflective, silky look of the water tells me that he's used a longest exposure. And you can see, if you have a look, you can actually see the lines in the water where there was probably different shades of colours passing by because of stuff in the water. So that sort of tells me, like I said, I've got no EXIF information whatsoever, so I'm playing a guessing game here. As far as an image goes, yeah, it looks really nice. I think somebody else has said he'd like to see it warmer. Frank, I agree. I think the white balance is slightly off. And something that you need to just be wary of at night, especially if you use auto white balance, the camera will get confused, because if we just have a look at the before and after there, just with that, the difference that's made, the camera will get confused when you have auto white balance, simply because of all the different lights that are there, because you've got natural light, you've got dark, you've got some artificial lights on as well, which are quite prominent in the image. So your camera's trying to decide, what setting do I use? Because there's just so much going on, right? So it quite often will get things right. So it's really important when you bring your image home, let me just show you, that you look at something that was white in the image. So if you have a look just behind this boat, he's got, must be a rudder or something, and the rudders have got white on them. And if you have a look here, it's quite blue. So by adjusting the temperature, zooming in and adjusting the temperature until they sort of look white. Let's see, I can bring that up until they sort of look, they start to look white, not orange, but white. Somewhere about there. Then you know that you're probably closer to the actual white balance. Okay, because the likelihood that they were blue, if we have a look at this one here, see how blue they are. So that tells me the white balance was out. And so that was something that I thought as well. The other thing I think that's going on here, so like I said, shot at a high aperture. That's how we're getting these stars around the light. There's a lot of blown sort of highlights happening in this building as well. So you can see up here, there's a light lighting up the front here. There's some lights over here. And I find that quite distracting. So I would really work hard to try and get rid of those. So I'm just going to drop the highlights on this. Once again, I've only got a JPEG, so my job's a little bit harder. I'm just going to play with things slightly to see if I can just improve the overall look of the image. And you can see, just as I increase the shadows there, see those stars, those lines? That's the risk you take when you have a longer exposure using a higher aperture. Alright, so I'm just having a bit of a play around here, just so I can bring it to a bit of a different, just to give it an idea. Once again, and this is all about post-processing, but also when you're shooting in the field, you want to make sure that you've, it's probably a bit too warm, you got to get that right. You want to make sure that you're thinking about all these things, so when you get back to your computer and you process the image, you can, give it give it the adjustments that are going to just finish it off. So you're thinking about this when you're shooting it. Now you can have a look straight away, the difference in those two images, just by fixing a little bit of the color, like the warmth or the white balance has really made a difference. Dropping the highlights has made a difference. So you can see that now, we've retained a bit more detail in the sky in the back left corner, because it's a beautiful looking sky. A bit more detail in the willow tree, which I think is a really nice feature. And a bit more detail in the reflections in the water. So let's go back to the full screen here. Now the other thing, from a composition point of view, I mean, once again, we weren't there. I don't know whether this is a bridge or I don't know what it does, so it's hard to understand where I could have stood. But I'm a big fan of not just having water across the entire front of the image if you can help it. So I would rather see a leading line like this wall here from the left, and if you just crop that like that, it's probably going to look better anyway, because there's all that in the foreground is doing nothing for this image. So once again, this is a composition sort of tip for you, is try and have it so you've got a leading line. Now if he had moved a bit to the left, there's a couple of things that I reckon would have happened. Number one, this boat here, maybe he could have got the whole boat in the shot. And this wall here would have come down lower and given you more foreground. At the risk, though, that you would lose this over here. The benefit of being here, and this is what happens, if you imagine if you moved left, this building here would move behind this willow tree. And I think it's quite nice, this building sitting here. It would move if you move to the left. So if you move to the right, it's going to bring that more out because of parallax. Okay, it's a bit complex, but yeah. I would have thought maybe move a bit to the left, get more of this boat in. But otherwise, you could crop it like that, and you've got a really nice pano. That boat, because you haven't got the full boat in, is not really adding any value, and those lights are really quite distracting. So I'm going to crop them out, and you watch what happens now. Okay. Now I've probably made it a bit too warm. Let me just bring that back a little bit. Yeah, I probably need to keep it at that warmth, and then I'm going to reduce the warmth in, because this artificial light is really throwing some orangey warming light out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now just see what happens if I... Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Where's my brush gone? I just want to brush over all of this area here that is really bright. You see, I've just got the highlights on. I've got the temp. I'm dropping the temp right down on these really orange areas to try and just get the white balance right on the rest of the building. You can see by doing this, I might even drop the exposure down slightly and see what happens. Yeah, I think that works good. Because it's artificially lit, it's causing us quite a bit of grief. Look at the detail coming back out of that now. Let's just give it a bit of clarity as well then. And yeah, this down here, there's a very bright light down here. Yeah, and he might have been going for the reflection in the water. That's I agree, Viking. That's what I said. I'm not in there in your mind, so I don't know exactly. I'm just giving you a few technical aspects and things that I would do. I mean, even if I got rid of that cropping, now that I've gone through and made those few adjustments on some of the other areas of the image, if we do it before and after, you'll see that just, totally changes the whole mood of the image. Look at the detail in that willow now compared to what's over here, just by reducing the exposure in that area. The colours are different. Everything, it's just starting to really take shape. So it's looking, yeah. So there's a million and one things you can do, but I just think that at night time. So the whole today was all about talking about night photography and the errors that can happen. And if I go back, you can see that it's a nice image anyway. You could leave it at that. The full composition still works nicely. For me, I was just tweaking it a little bit, and I would find that this error that's happening here, or this artifact, is because of shooting at a high F number. Just keep that in mind when you're thinking about long exposure. If you can put a CPL filter on, even though you don't need it, because you don't want to reduce the reflections, So, you know, you'd turn it around so you're not reducing the reflections. You would reduce the amount of light coming into your camera. So any way you can reduce the light coming into, I've been known to put on soft grads, one from the top, one from the bottom, to reduce the amount of light coming in, so I'm not trying to wind the aperture up to a high f number because of this diffraction that happens. So, you know, you could use a soft grad on this image. You know, there's no doubt that if you had shot this using a soft grad, I'll just simulate it in here, using a soft grad, that you could drop the exposure. You know, let's just, you know, it would still work. If I'd put a soft grad into this out on the field, let's just, you know, even it works here. Look at that. Just bring the exposure up on the image now slightly. Yeah. So once again, if I'd done that out on the field, I'm going to get a better looking image, and you can see the difference in those two images just by doing that. So, you know, and a lot you can't fix a lot in post. I can't stress that enough. You know, things like this artifact happening, you can't fix in post very easily. You'd sit here for a long time, and I've done it, let me tell you. Slowly, you know, getting rid of it at each of these lines with a healing brush in Photoshop. It's just a very, very time consuming task. You don't want to be doing it. But great photo otherwise. And I think somebody's saying, Frank says, I would brighten up the red brick building and bring out the sun a bit more. Yeah, you could do that. I mean, also, there's a million and one things we could do. But from a night photography point of view, you can see a few tips there. Let me go back to the library now just so we can summarize the three images. So this one here, you know, it was lacking a bit of contrast. You know, it was a lot of haloing going around the brighter lights. Even if you reduce your exposure value, you know, reduce your exposure value when you take the image. What am I doing? There we go. So you can see the difference, just increasing the contrast, reducing the highlights, and just being a little bit mindful of the fact that lighting is going to create a haze when you have a lot of lighting, especially in a city that usually is quite, it may be quite a polluted city. There's a lot of traffic there. So you just need to be prepared for the fact that that's going to happen. So that's sort of that image. That was the lesson from there. And get rid of any distracting dots like up on the horizon. I think that makes a big difference. This one here, you know, once again, you know, thanks, Big Aussie's provided a couple of images over the time. You know, you can see the differences between the two images. Be careful with the composition. Once again, don't wind your aperture up crazy. You can see the haze in the sky, so don't try and... when you're taking a photo at night, you're going to get pixels bunched to the left. It's all the blacks. It's going to happen. You know, so don't be scared when you see them across to the left. If it's, you know, some of the detail is going to be lost. That's just what happens at night. So be prepared for that. But know that you're going to get this star effect if you wind your aperture all the way up to the high F numbers. It's going to create a problem for you, and there's no other way around that. And if we look at this one, same thing happening there. I think the white balance, you know, so when you're looking at taking photos at night, be really mindful of white balance, because your camera will get confused, especially when you're pointing your camera at something where there's still some sunlight, there's some darker sky, there's some artificial lights, which is predominantly what's in here. Your camera's going to try and do the white balance based on, you know, some of that information. It's going to get it wrong. So you need to be ready for that. It's going to happen. There's no way around it. Yeah, so there you go. So hopefully you found that all helpful. And thanks again to those three guys for sending those in. If you do want your images critiqued on the Pixel Chatter show, shoot an email. Instructions are down below. Shoot an email to me with your image. Try and include the EXIF information if you can. But thank you to Derek Windsor, Chris, who is also you know, known as Big Oz here in the chat room, and still Steve Millwood, who none of those are on, but hopefully they'll come along to see their photos being critiqued at some stage. Alrighty, well, that's pretty much it for today. Any questions? Anything to wrap up with? Anybody got any questions they want to ask? Just whilst we're doing that, I'll just remind you, join me on social media. Love to see you there. And let me jump back into something else. Yeah, any questions? Just type your questions in the question box if you have any questions. Who's out there? Who's going out shooting this weekend? Hopefully somebody is. I just recently had I recently had a person wanted me to buy one of my prints for the side of their cafe, and I might have to go reshoot it for them because they want to do their whole wall in it, and the resolution's not high enough because they want it to be huge. All right, Big Oz says, no worries, mate. I'll try a better one next time. Good idea. Where do I park when shooting around Sydney Harbour or Darling Harbour? I typically just find some parking on the street. The good thing about shooting there, especially in the summer, is I'll typically be outside of the parking restrictions. There's a lot of parking spots that the restrictions don't start till 8 or 8:30 in the morning. So as you'll notice, I do a lot of sunrise photography, and the reason I do that is because the sunrise is in the east. So I'll typically park just on the street. Sydney Harbour Bridge, for example, you can park at Dawes Point there. There's heaps of parking, and there's no parking restrictions until 8:30 in the morning. But sometimes I've just got to park where there's a parking meter and pay. It might be $10. It's not a big deal, but that's typically what I do. The other trick is you park on the other side of the harbour and walk across the harbour bridge. But no, there's normally parking available. It's actually pretty good at night or in the morning. Where's Aurora for PC, says Brian. I have no idea. No idea. Are they developing it? I don't know. I had Aurora for Mac. I tried it out. I used it. I actually, I was going to get involved in, because I was going to use it. I actually don't use it, and I don't. For my HDR, I've actually stopped using HDR software, and I'm using Photoshop. And I do a thing called luminosity masking, which is a bit more complex. But if you find, there's YouTube clips on how to do it. And I find that gives me the best results. Even whilst Aurora did a good job, and I'd be happy to recommend it and say, yep, use it, and I don't get any commission for saying that. I would, I tend to think that it's better to blend your photos in Photoshop and have that control, depending on what you want to do. Yeah, you're back next month, are you, Big Oz? Okay, cool. Alrighty, so the other thing I'll just remind you too is I launched that community today. If you want to join in on the community, you can do that. It's as little as $2 a month. You get access to the VIP private online chat group. You will need Facebook to do that, so if you're not on Facebook, it's not going to work for you because I've made it a Facebook group, so I don't have to work out how to administer it. You'll also get access to exclusive content inside Patreon here. I have the ability to make posts that only certain people will see. And as you can see, the third thing you get there by becoming a VIP is a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, which I know everybody wants. So it's just me being a little bit cheeky. And then you can go up from there depending on what you want. Like I said, you don't need to become a Patreon to keep enjoying my free content. I'll keep providing the free content, but I really want to take it to that next level. And I know that as a community we can really do that. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Any other questions? Yeah, Jimmy McIntyre. Yeah, so Jimmy was actually, I did a lot. He had a magazine called HDR1. I was one of the contributors. I don't know if it's still going on. I don't think it is. But Jimmy is who taught me the whole luminosity masking thing. So if you do want to do luminosity masking, here's sort of where I sort of started out. And he makes it very simple to understand how. What you can do, which I did, is there's a bunch of places where you can actually download luminosity mask presets. And that makes your life really easy. And so, go looking for them. Once you get into it, it takes a little bit of brain space and brain power to learn. But once you learn it, you'll really benefit by it. But these days, with things like the D810, the need for HDR for me has reduced dramatically, and so I'm not doing a lot of HDR. I'm mostly using filters out in the field, and by using a filter out in the field, I'm reducing the dynamic range, and then Lightroom can handle it. I'm actually hoping to get a look at the GFX, the Fuji GFX medium format, which has amazing dynamic range. Apparently, something like 13 stops or something, or 16 stops of light. So I'm going to go and check that out. And these cameras are just changing the way we do things. The new Nikon's going to be released soon. So it means that we don't have to bother with doing things like HDR. Oh, Jimmy McIntyre has the presets as well, Brian. Okay, well, there you go. So, you don't have to worry about mucking around. You can get the presets and you're off. All right, well, that's it for today. Thanks once again for tuning in, gang. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the VIP community. If you want to become a part of that, I will check that later on today and see if anybody's joined up. And I'll as time goes on, I'm sure that community will build and we'll do some amazing things together. Alrighty, thanks again for joining me, gang. I really do appreciate it. And get out there and take some photos, because that's what it's all about. That's the best way to learn. Well, I think what Henry Cartier said, your first 10,000 photos are going to be your worst. Well, I'm still in my first 10,000. No, I wouldn't be. I've definitely got more than 10,000, but they were definitely my worst. So there you go. All right, have a good weekend, gang. Cheers.